This is Jen Lockman, and this is 5 simple steps to strategic planning success. Step number 5. You have come so far in the strategic planning process and are in the 5th and final step. Let's take a second here to whiz through the steps that you've completed already. First, if you remember way back when, you prepared for strategic planning. Next, you envisioned your desired state. In the 3rd step, you assessed your organization's current state. And in the last step, you set strategic priorities and SMART goals. And finally, today, you're going to lay the groundwork to implement, track, and pivot. Okay, so at this point, you've got your strategic plan done, and everyone's feeling great about what you've accomplished. Your staff and board can see clearly where your organization is heading, and they're ready to jump in. But where do you get started? In order to make your strategic plan easy to implement, you need an action plan. Your strategic plan sets goals for the next 3 years. And for people to take action now, they need to understand how those goals translate into action for this year, this quarter, this month, and down to today. Your strategy also speaks collectively about what you as an organization want to achieve, without specifics about who is responsible for what. Your action plan is the document that will give you all the specifics you need to get started implementing your strategic plan now. Let's take a look at an example here so you can see the exact steps that are involved in putting together your action plan. So let's say your strategic plan sets a goal of increasing foundation funding to 15% of total revenue. The first thing you'll do is translate that 3-year goal into a SMART goal for this year. So you'll look at the numbers, consider your current state and the resources you have available, and decide what goal is right for this year. Let's say it's 8%. Next, you'll think about what needs to happen this year to reach that goal. For example, maybe your staff and board hold a meeting to strategize about building partnerships with more foundations. Then your development director will be charged with conducting research to find foundations that will be a good fit. Then your executive director will make calls to, say, 20 foundations to begin cultivating relationships. And finally, your development director will submit 20 proposals to foundations throughout the year. There's one final step here, and it's one that most organizations miss. You want to ask yourself, what else needs to change? You can have the smartest strategy in the world, and if your culture and leadership don't reinforce the right behaviors, you're going to miss a trick. So what needs to align in your culture and leadership for your organization to succeed in foundation fundraising? You need to have a culture of philanthropy and one that supports creative thinking. Your leadership needs to be committed to fundraising and to building foundation relationships. Once you've identified these other organizational components that need to change, make sure there are goals and action steps reflected in your strategic plan and action plan so that your organization is aligned. As you build your action plan, you'll quickly learn that it's not only a great tool to help with implementation, it's also going to help you track your progress along the way. So let's continue to run with the example of foundation fundraising. First, you're going to break your year into quarters. You don't want to wait until the end of the year to realize you haven't hit your goal. So you need to set key performance indicators, or KPIs, for each quarter. We already know that by the end of the year, we want to increase foundation funding to 8%. So you'll set that KPI for quarter 4, and then you'll set incremental KPIs for the other quarters that will keep you in movement towards your annual goal. And there may be other measurements that you want to set that will indicate whether you're on track with your goals or not. The number of prospects identified, the number of proposals submitted, and the approval rate you're seeing on those proposals. When you complete this process, you'll see that you're left with a roadmap of key performance indicators that will show everyone in your organization how you expect to progress throughout the year. And once the year begins, this will also serve as a dashboard or a quick snapshot of how things are going. I love the simple stoplight format for your dashboard. Green indicates you're at 95% or higher. yellow 80 to 95%, and red means you're under 80%. So at the end of every quarter, you'll fill in the dashboard and you'll quickly see whether it's time to celebrate your achievement, watch how things are going, or if you're in the red, it may be time to act. Okay, so what do you do if you go into the red? Well, first of all, don't panic. This is going to happen. And instead of getting all worked up about it, I encourage you to get curious. What does that look like? Well, let's work again with our case study. You may have noticed that we did get into the red with our KPI of achieving 60% approval rating on our proposals. So what do? We ask 3 simple questions. First, what assumptions did we make? When we set this goal, just like when we set all of our others, we made some assumptions about how we thought things would go. In this case, we may have assumed that the executive director's phone calls would spark a connection with the foundation. We may have also assumed that the development director would write great winning proposals. And lastly, that the foundations would see a fit between their goals and our work. So once we've identified the assumptions, we want to ask ourselves, which of these assumptions may not be solid? So we have an internal conversation and also talk with foundations to get as much feedback as we can, and this is what we learn. Our proposals are great. The foundations are interested in our work and see a fit, but they don't yet feel that they know us well enough to give us money. So our assumption that a phone call from the executive director would cultivate the relationship enough before submitting a proposal is not true. So then we ask ourselves, is it time to pivot or do we stay the course? Do we think that if we continue with this plan of attack that we'll be able to reach our strategic goal around foundation funding? Or do we need to make a fundamental change in our strategy? So once again, we talk things over and decide that it's time to pivot. We need to spend more of this year building relationships with foundations. So we decide to decrease our goal for the year so that we can still reach our 3-year goal of having foundation funding be 15% of total revenue. So there you have it. You now know how to implement, track, and pivot, and it's time to turn all of that knowledge into action. Below this video, you'll find a worksheet that will give you a clean and simple template for an action plan. Download it now and create your action plan so that you, your staff, and your board can start putting the pieces together to create your organization's vision for the future. Congratulations! You've gotten through the 5 simple, but certainly not easy, steps to strategic planning success. I know that it takes a lot of courage and commitment to disrupt the status quo and to create a strategic plan for your organization. And I also know that it's worth it. Your nonprofit will now have the clarity that you need to create the results that you want in your organization and, more importantly, in the world. Congratulations. Did you like this video? To see more like it and to get other free tips, go to www.lockmanco.com and sign up for our emails. And please share it with your colleagues and friends.